The words on the screen seemed to vibrate. Cancel. My presentation. Months of work, my best shot at proving myself. Cancelled. What? Cultural sensitivity concerns. The email was signed by Brenda, my manager for all of 2 months, the queen of corporate buzzwords and performative outrage. Vague accusations. Potential microaggressions. Nothing concrete, just feelings. Her feelings weaponized. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might be sick. The injustice of it felt like ice water flooding my veins. Cancel. Just like that. Based on flimsy, subjective nonsense while she hid behind a shield of faux righteousness. I could almost hear her smug, self-satisfied tone through the sterile corporate email template. She thought she'd won. She thought she could just roll over me, my work, my career, using wokeness as her bulldozer. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly fathom, was that in trying to bury me she just dug her own grave. She had no idea who she was really dealing with, or the kind of hypocrisy I was about to uncover. The mask was about to come off. And it wasn't going to be pretty. Before the reign of Brenda began, life at Sterling Marketing felt breathable. A Mark, by the way. Just a regular guy in my mid-30s working as a marketing strategist. Been here nearly 7 years. Got a wife, Sarah, 2 great kids at home. My focus has always been simple. Do good work, deliver results for our clients, and earn my paycheck. Sterling used to be the kind of place where that was valued. Our old boss, Dave, was straightforward. He cared about hitting targets, keeping clients happy, and whether your ideas actually made sense in the real world. He wasn't trying to win social justice points. He was trying to run a successful department. We worked hard, we collaborated, we shared the occasional grumble about deadlines over bad coffee, but there was a fundamental respect there. An understanding that we were professionals hired for our skills, not our ability to navigate an ever-changing minefield of linguistic purity tests. I felt secure, valued for my contributions. I was putting everything into this big quarterly presentation for a key client. It wasn't just another project. It was a culmination of months of research, strategic thinking, something I was genuinely proud of. It felt like the next logical step, proof that my practical, results-driven approach worked. Things felt normal, grounded in common sense. Then Dave retired and the announcement came. Brenda was our new marketing manager. Young, ambitious, and armed with a vocabulary that seemed designed to obscure rather than clarify. The calm didn't just break, it shattered. Brenda didn't walk into the office. She descended, draped in the latest DI jargon like it was armor. Her introductory meeting felt less like a strategy session and more like a re-education seminar. Forget market share and ROI. The new priorities were brave spaces, intersectional frameworks, and decolonizing our marketing narratives. I saw the confused, wary looks on my colleagues' faces. We were here to sell products, not to dismantle the patriarchy one ad campaign at a time. It felt jarringly out of place, almost theatrical. My first direct taste of this came during a brainstorming session for a new insurance campaign. I pitched a tagline, clear, concise, focused on saving the customer money. Brenda stopped me mid-sentence, adopting her signature look of profound concern. "Mark," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "while I hear the economic benefit, we need to consider the privilege inherent in that framing. Does focusing solely on cost potentially marginalize communities facing systemic financial barriers?" I blinked. We were talking about car insurance. "Brenda," I tried, "the research shows cost is the primary driver for this demographic." She cut me off with a gentle hand wave. Perhaps, she conceded, though her tone suggested otherwise, but the impact of our language matters more than intent. Let's aim for something that speaks to resilience, perhaps? Empowerment? It was utterly baffling. She wasn't offering constructive marketing feedback. She was policing thought, twisting simple concepts into ideological pretzels. It wasn't a major blow-up, but it was a clear signal. Results didn't matter as much as adhering to her specific, woke worldview. A knot of unease started tightening in my chest. This wasn't just a new management style, it felt like an occupation. The unease grew week by week. Brenda rolled out mandatory inclusive language workshops and weekly DI pulse checks. These meetings rarely involved actual marketing discussion. Instead, Brenda would hold court, dissecting random pieces of copy or design choices for imagined slights. An image wasn't diverse enough. A headline used a word that could be misinterpreted by someone, somewhere. Productivity slowed as everyone started walking on eggshells. People became hesitant to share ideas, fearing instant condemnation. The easy banter in the office died, replaced by cautious whispers and strained smiles. Brenda seemed to relish correcting people, especially in front of others. Tom, a senior copywriter, casually mentioned needing a good salesman for a project, and Brenda pounced. "Ah, Tom," she interrupted, loud enough for half the floor to hear, "let's remember our training. Salesperson or sales professional promotes gender inclusivity, doesn't it?" Tom flushed crimson, mumbled an apology, and the entire meeting ground to a halt. It wasn't about inclusivity, it was about asserting dominance, making everyone feel small and slightly stupid. It was draining. All this time wasted on linguistic gymnastics and ideological purity tests instead of focusing on the clients who actually paid our salaries. I tried to tune it out, pouring all my energy into the big client presentation. It felt like my one chance to showcase solid, results-oriented work amidst the chaos. I ran the core strategy by Brenda early on. She seemed distracted, nodding vaguely while scrolling through her phone. Her only real comment was a mumbled reminder to ensure the visual narrative avoids perpetuating harmful stereotypes. Fine. I made a mental note to use the most bland, generically inclusive stock photos possible. When I mentioned I was nearing completion, she fixed me with that intense stare. "Good. Send the full deck over to me before it goes anywhere near the client, Mark. I need to personally vet it for alignment with our ethical commitments." That knot in my chest tightened into a full-blown anchor of dread. This wasn't a review, it felt like an impending interrogation. A week before the client meeting, I sent Brenda the presentation deck. I double-checked everything. The strategy was watertight, backed by robust data. The design was clean, professional. And the imagery? Diverse, inclusive, almost painfully neutral. I'd bent over backwards to preempt any possible objection, however absurd. Her response was swift. "My office." No. I walked in and the atmosphere was arctic. She sat rigid behind her desk, my printed slides splayed out like incriminating evidence, covered in furious red ink. Her eyes, when they met mine, were blazing. "Mark," she said, her voice dangerously low, "I have spent the morning reviewing this document. And frankly, I am appalled." My heart sank. Here we go. Appalled by what specifically, Brenda? She jabbed a finger at a slide showing market demographics. This reducing human beings to statistical categories. It's dehumanizing. How can you justify segmenting people based on age or income? It reinforces harmful societal boxes. I took a breath, trying to remain calm. "Brenda, that's fundamental marketing practice. It's anonymized data. We need to understand who we're trying to reach to tailor the message effectively." She scoffed. "Effective at what? Perpetuating capitalist structures?" And this image, she stabbed at the picture of the smiling, mixed-race family I'd carefully selected, is painfully contrived. It screams token diversity. It feels inauthentic, almost mocking the very communities we claim to support. Did you even consider the optics? I felt my own anger rising. It's a widely used positive stock image, Brenda. It's meant to represent a happy customer. Whose definition of happy, Mark? She retorted, her voice rising. Whose narrative are you centering? It reeks of heteronormativity and ignores countless other valid family structures. It was madness. She ripped into everything. A bar chart showing competitor market share was promoting aggressive, toxic masculinity. A bullet point about cost-effectiveness was ignoring the lived experiences of the economically marginalized. I attempted to push back, to explain the rationale, the industry standards, the client's explicit focus on ROI. She wasn't listening. Her critique wasn't about improvement, it was about demolition. Her eyes had a gleam of righteous fervor. "Mark," she said, leaning forward, her voice dripping with condescension, "it's clear you haven't fully internalized the deep-seated biases in traditional marketing. This presentation, as it stands, is a liability. It's culturally insensitive, potentially damaging to our brand, and frankly, unacceptable." I tried one last time. "Brenda, this client is crucial. Canceling or drastically altering this now could jeopardize the entire account. Can we find a compromise?" Her expression hardened. "There is no compromise on ethics, Mark. I cannot and will not sign off on this." The next morning the email landed. Presentation canceled. Copy to her boss and HR. Citing cultural sensitivity concerns and a failure to align with company values. My values? I valued honesty. I valued competence. I valued results. Everything she seemed determined to undermine. That was it. The breaking point. She wasn't just wrong, she was destructive. And she was hiding behind a shield of buzzwords. Fine. If she wanted to play dirty, using subjective offenses to tear down my work, then I'd find out if her own past could withstand the same scrutiny. It was time to look behind the curtain. That night, sleep was impossible. Adrenaline and fury coursed through me. Sarah knew something was up, but I just mumbled about work stress. Once the house was quiet, I camped out in my home office, the glow of the monitor my only companion. Operation Unmask Brenda commenced. Where to even begin? Her carefully curated online presence was a fortress of virtue. LinkedIn was polished chrome, all professional accolades and endorsements for strategic thinking and inclusive leadership. Facebook was locked down. Twitter was a predictable echo chamber of social justice retweets and bland corporate positivity. It felt impenetrable. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this hypervigilant, performatively woke persona was recent. People who shout their virtue that loudly often learned the script somewhere. They weren't born speaking fluent HR-approved intersectional feminist theory. I started digging deeper, thinking about snippets she dropped. Her alma mater. Her maiden name, mentioned briefly during introductions. I searched university archives, old student newspaper sites, anything that might predate the polished corporate image. Nothing. I tried searching her name combined with older internet slang forum keywords, anything slightly less sanitized. Hours bled into hours. The coffee turned cold. Doubt gnawed at me. Was I chasing ghosts? Was I just bitter and letting it cloud my judgment? Then a breakthrough. On a nearly defunct tech forum from the mid-2000s, a comment thread discussing campus politics. A username jumped out, Brenda Loves Truth 08, incorporating her maiden name and I guessed her graduation year. The comment itself was innocuous, but the username was linked to a profile. And in that profile, a link to a blog. An ancient-looking blog hosted on something that looked like a relic from the early internet, complete with flashing text and a tiled background that hurt my eyes. The title? Brenda Tells It Like It Is. My pulse quickened. I clicked. And I hit the jackpot. Post after post, dating back nearly 15 years, revealed a Brenda utterly unrecognizable from the manager who lectured us on microaggressions. It was a raw, unfiltered stream of consciousness from her early 20s, and it was breathtakingly offensive. There were rants laced with crude ethnic stereotypes, jokes that punched down hard, dismissive sneers about feminazis and the PC police. One entry mocked sensitivity training as a waste of time for crybabies. Another complained bitterly about affirmative action. A particularly nasty one ridiculed people struggling with their weight. It wasn't just insensitive, it was hostile, prejudiced, and dripping with the exact kind of smug intolerance she now claimed to fight against. My hands were actually shaking as I scrolled. The hypocrisy was staggering. It was pure, unadulterated gold. I started taking screenshots, saving pages, meticulously documenting everything. The anger I felt had cooled into a laser focus. This wasn't just about saving my presentation anymore. This was about exposing a fraud. She had built her career, her entire professional identity, on a foundation of lies. And I had just found the dynamite to bring it all down. The days leading up to the debrief meeting were agonizingly slow. Brenda radiated an aura of serene confidence, occasionally offering me pitying looks across the office, the conquering hero magnanimously surveying the vanquished. She probably imagined I'd come to the meeting tail-tucked, ready to apologize for my thought crimes. Little did she know. I spent my time preparing meticulously. First, I refined my defense of the presentation, gathering industry benchmarks and examples to prove my approach was standard, sound, and in no way insensitive by any reasonable measure. I anticipated her counterarguments, preparing factual rebuttals. Second, and more importantly, I organized the evidence against Brenda. Screenshots printed, key quotes highlighted, dates confirmed. I wasn't planning an ambush, I was planning a surgical strike. Calm, factual, undeniable. The meeting day dawned. I walked into the conference room feeling a cold sense of purpose. Brenda was already there, chatting animatedly with Robert, the VP of Marketing, and Linda, the HR representative. She gave me a tight, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. Robert looked serious, Linda impassive. Brenda kicked off the meeting, launching into a well-rehearsed speech about the unfortunate necessity of canceling my presentation. She used all her favorite buzzwords: potential for harm, unexamined privilege, brand risk, values alignment. She painted herself as the reluctant guardian of the company's moral compass. Robert listened, nodding occasionally. Linda took notes. When Brenda concluded her indictment with a sigh, Robert turned to me. "Mark, your perspective? Showtime." "Thank you," I began, keeping my voice level. "Robert, Linda, Brenda. I understand the concerns raised, although I respectfully disagree with the assessment." I then systematically dismantled her critique. I presented the data on market segmentation, showed examples of similar campaigns from top competitors, explained the rationale behind the visuals, and highlighted the positive feedback from preliminary client checks. I emphasized the concrete business risks of not proceeding. Robert's expression shifted from stern to thoughtful. Linda paused her note-taking, watching me closely. Brenda started fidgeting, her smugness replaced by a flicker of impatience. I paused, letting the silence hang for a moment. However, I continued, shifting my tone slightly. "I do fundamentally agree with Brenda that upholding our company values, especially regarding respectful discourse and avoiding genuinely offensive material, is paramount." Brenda straightened up, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. She thought I was capitulating. "Which leads me to something I discovered while researching best practices around sensitivity," I said, slowly reaching for the folder in front of me. "I came across some older online publications that seem inconsistent with the standards Brenda is advocating for now. Perhaps she could offer some context." Brenda's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Mark." "Specifically," I said, opening the folder and pulling out the first printout, a blog titled "Brenda Tells It Like It Is," and forum posts under the username BrendaLovesTruth08. For example, this post from October 12, 2008. The moment I said the username and blog title, the blood drained from Brenda's face. She recognized it instantly. Her eyes widened in panic. Discusses her frustration with diversity quotas, using language I think we can all agree is highly problematic. I started reading one of the milder yet still damning quotes aloud. Brenda gasped audibly. "Where? How did you find that?" She stammered, her voice suddenly thin and reedy. "That's ancient history. It's irrelevant. People change. Do they?" I asked calmly, placing the printout on the table. "Because this post here, I produced another, mocks the very concept of safe spaces that you mentioned in our first team meeting. And this one, I added a third, containing particularly ugly stereotypes, uses language that, by the standards you applied to my presentation, Brenda, would be grounds for immediate termination." I didn't raise my voice. I just laid the facts bare. Robert's jaw was tight. He picked up the printouts, his eyes scanning them quickly. Linda leaned in, her expression shocked. Brenda was visibly shaking now, her face blotchy. "This is completely unfair." She choked out, tears welling in her eyes. "He's doing this to retaliate. It's a personal attack because I held him accountable." Am I? I looked directly at Robert and Linda. Or am I presenting documented evidence of hypocrisy that calls Brenda's judgment, and the basis for canceling a critical presentation, into serious question? These aren't subjective interpretations of stock photos, Brenda. These are your words. Verbatim. I slid the folder across the table. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by Brenda's shaky breaths turning into quiet sobs. Robert finished reading, his face like thunder. He looked at Brenda, his voice devoid of warmth. "Brenda, did you write these?" She tried to speak, failed, then nodded mutely, tears streaming down her face. "I was young. I didn't know." Robert cut her off with a sharp gesture. "The hypocrisy is staggering," he said flatly. He glanced at Linda, who gave a single, decisive nod. "Brenda," Robert continued, his voice cold as ice, "gather your personal items. Linda will escort you from the building. You are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation." The carefully constructed mask of woke superiority didn't just slip, it disintegrated. Watching her being let out, utterly broken and humiliated, wasn't about cruelty. It was about the crushing, unavoidable impact of truth. It was the profoundly satisfying sound of karma collecting its due. The investigation was swift. Brenda's past writings were undeniable, her hypocrisy laid bare. Combined with her disruptive management style and the costly cancellation of my presentation based on flimsy grounds, The company terminated her employment within days. No dramatic announcement, just a quiet removal from the company directory and an email stating she was no longer with Sterling Marketing. You could almost feel the tension release in the office, like a collective exhale. Robert called me into his office, apologized sincerely for the situation, and admitted they'd prioritized buzzwords over substance in hiring Brenda. A mistake, he assured me, that wouldn't happen again. My presentation was immediately put back on the schedule. I delivered it the following week, feeling a profound sense of vindication. The client loved the strategy and we secured their business for another 2 years. It was a huge win professionally and personally. Slowly but surely, the marketing department began to feel like itself again. The mandatory jargon sessions disappeared. People started talking openly, sharing ideas without fear of ideological purity tests. The focus shifted back to creativity, collaboration, and actually achieving results for our clients. There was still an emphasis on respect, but it was grounded in common sense, not performative extremism. Looking back, the whole Brenda episode feels like a bizarre fever dream. Her rise and fall were a cautionary tale about the dangers of performative activism and the hollowness of virtue signaling when it's not backed by genuine character. She tried to use the language of social justice as a weapon, a tool for control and self-aggrandizement, and it backfired spectacularly. Exposing her wasn't something I enjoyed, but it felt necessary. It was about defending my work, my reputation, and pushing back against the absurdity that was poisoning our workplace. Seeing her face the consequences of her own hypocrisy. Well, let's just say the restoration of sanity and the taste of hard-earned justice felt incredibly satisfying.